getting upset at me and you want to confront me after the show, don't do that, because you'll lose. You're going to lose. No matter if you're right or not, it doesn't matter. You'll still lose, because I'm paid to be witty for a living. I quit professionally. That's what I do.
Don't call me Ginger. I guess you can call me Ginger if you want, but... Well, the ER is the offensive part of any word. Stop yelling shit out!
Stephen Ira Hofstetter is a stand-up comedian and former comedy club owner who has risen to middling fame due largely to his presence on YouTube, with a channel currently sitting at just under 700,000 subscribers. Steve began his comedy career in 2002 in Queens, New York, the very place he would open his hilariously short-lived comedy club, The Laughing Devil, a club that boasted a spacious 50-seat capacity yet still managed to rope in comedic legends like Rich Voss.
You guys have front row right here. But if I really stood on that wall, then everybody would have front row.
And possibly others.
Who cares?
Since Steve's failed foray into comedy club ownership, the red-headed funny man has turned all his attention towards the internet for the fame and validation he so desperately seeks, with his most popular YouTube clips responding to hecklers.
Sticks and stones may break your bones, but words will never hurt you. Did you just say after that?
Steve also met his ex-wife on J-Date. That's not really relevant to this story, but it is funny. I could describe Hofstetter's career in my own words, but why bother when he was kind enough to describe himself for us on his YouTube channel? Hey everyone, my name's Steve Hofstetter, and I'm a stand-up comedian. I travel the world telling jokes, owning hecklers, and making hilarious comedy movies and TV shows. This channel features stand-up comedy, ad-lib, vlogs, comedy breakdown series like Afterburn, and heckler after heckler getting owned. If you like Jimmy Carr, Bo Burnham, Bill Burr, or George Carlin, you have wonderful taste in comedy. But they're completely unrelated to this channel. They are great comedians, though. What a great way to cram yourself into the search results of much larger industry peers. And Bo Burnham? Jesus Christ. I'd have more respect for the man if he included Weird Al amongst his list of great comedians. There's a lot to cover with our fair-skinned friend, so I'll break this video down into 3 sections, covering Steve's stand-up career, his rise to internet stardom, and what exactly makes him so uniquely insufferable. So fasten those seatbelts, strap yourselves in, and get ready to jump into the hilarious mind of Steve Hofstetter.
Please clap.
For anyone unfamiliar with his act, Steve's progressive, and he's got no problem letting you know it.
I'm progressive in my comedy and in my politics.
Much of his stand-up is spent castigating the ignorance of conservatives, from their anti-gay religious beliefs to general xenophobia, and even their stance on gun ownership.
I would Ben Shapiro, so his base would not be able to be homophobic anymore.
I know that there might be some Trump supporters here. I know we're in Arizona, racism's test kitchen.
No one's coming for your guns. You sound dumb when you speak like that.
Do you love him yet, LA? There's nothing wrong with a comedian being liberal. Some of the greatest comedians are fiercely progressive, from George Carlin to Louis C.K., and even much of Dave Chappelle's act coming from a liberal point of view. But all of these comedians manage to provide a unique perspective when targeting their conservative counterparts. Steve Hofstetter, however, prefers the low-hanging fruit. In his first career attempt at making waves, Hofstetter would target Larry the Cable Guy in his second CD release pompously titled A Cure for the Cable Guy, in which a Larry-shaped effigy could be seen dangling from a noose on the cover. In a show now lost to the annals of time, shock jocks Opie and Anthony would defend the red-necked catchphrase comic against attacks from the soulless stand-up, prompting a video response that couldn't come off as any more smug, even if Steve was seen slurping his own farts out of a wine glass.
Opie and Anthony said that I was attacking the South. Hardly. There's ignorance in every part of the United States. This is not an attack on the South, it's an attack on people who are dumb enough to spend $2 on a support our troops magnet instead of using that same $2 to send a letter to the troops to actually support them.
I won't make you suffer through the whole 7 minutes of Steve's self-satisfaction, but his main point here being that Larry had duped his fans into celebrating a lifestyle he flagrantly mocks through his character. You mean Larry the Cable Guy is stereotyping people from the South, and stupid Southerners still like him? My world is turned upside down. He goes on to mock the, quote, poor white trash that enjoys Larry's act before asking, how does it feel to be stereotyped? The video ends with a crescendo. When informed by Larry that he may be reading too deep into his character, Steve sarcastically states, I thought a comedian's job was to find something questionable about society and pick it apart in a humorous way. I hate to burst your bubble, Steve, but above all, your job as a comedian is to make people laugh. If there's a deeper subtext, fine, but you aren't Socrates. I'm no fan of Larry the Cable Guy, but I'd rather listen to 60 minutes of funny fart jokes than watch you wax philosophical on stage to the tune of smattering applause. Steve's failure to understand this point is likely caused by his inability to laugh at himself and stop taking himself so goddamn seriously for once in his life. But more on that later. Steve has been kind enough to post both of his major comedy specials on YouTube free of charge, likely because no one would be willing to pay for them otherwise. His first hour-long set, titled Ginger Kid, was released in March of 2015. A sickly Hofstetter can be seen trotting across the stage in front of a low-resolution backdrop of himself made into a South Park character. And on the day of this special's release, we were reminded that tragically, comedy had died on November 29th, 2011. What is it with terrible comedians branding themselves as South Park characters? The material here is inoffensive at best and painfully forgettable at its worst. Addressing Chick-fil-A's questionable donations, the incompetence of TSA employees, and of course, his red hair. Your standard Midwestern middles act. There's nothing memorable about the material here. What is memorable is how truly awful the presentation of this special is. From the terrible artwork behind him, to Steve's gaunt appearance, and even choppy editing compounded by out-of-sync audio.
There are a lot of sevens in this particular puzzle, like whatever I can do. I'm reading Sky Mall. That's how bad this shit got. I was reading Sky Mall. Like, I'm gonna be the asshole who buys something out of the sky. Like, oh, my pet needs a velvet staircase. I should get this. And I just run out of things to do as she starts to talk to me.
Steve proudly boasts this piece of uninspired visual diarrhea as the #2 comedy special on YouTube. So perhaps there is an audience for this type of humor. But I found myself zoning out more often than not, having to rewind often, dreaming of more valuable ways I could be spending my time. Let's jump to Steve's latest hour, Secret Optimist, a special that opens with a painfully self-congratulatory skit depicting Steve's friend and opener fawning over his new celebrity status as Guy with Comedy Special in 2017.
Just do your set? You're not nervous?
No, I'm excited, but it's a show.
There's gonna be, like, important people there.
Who's gonna be here that's gonna be any different?
The Obamas are gonna be here.
The Obamas are not coming.
Oh, and this is the #1 comedy special on YouTube according to Steve. Not a lot of competition in this market. I hope you made it this far into the video because I actually sat through this entire hour in what can only be described as an act of masochistic self-flagellation, willing myself to at least crack a smile. But in the end, I was left disappointed, 1 hour closer to my final resting place.
That's when I decided that I should be an optimist.
Steve did learn one valuable lesson from his last special. Noticeably absent is Steve's pixelated South Park caricature, mercifully replaced by the painted cement wall of Morty's comedy joint. The jokes delivered here are more of the same guilt-driven whingings one can hear on any liberal arts college campus. Tell me if any of this material sounds familiar to you.
Leviticus was the first issue of Cosmo. Now, most of you enjoyed that. A few of you didn't because you're prejudiced. But my point is, I was working with a Chinese comic once, and he came off stage and he asked me, he was like, "What do you think of my set?" I said, "I think he came off as kind of racist."
I won't say Steve hasn't improved since his last special, but the material here is so agonizingly derivative it's hard to pay attention to its more polished presentation. While listening to this special for the first time, I was shocked to learn that I had already heard many of the jokes told here. Not only the concepts, but the same beat-for-beat delivery and taglines. Now I'm not alleging Hofstetter is a joke thief. Who would steal such bland, forgettable material? But to elucidate the point I'm making, we'll need to go a little more in depth into the comedian's past on the internet.
Please clap.
By late 2016, Hofstetter had already carved out a name for himself as a heckler's worst nightmare. His YouTube channel featured videos like Selfish Mom Heckler Gets Owned, Comedian Owns Heckler for 4 minutes, and Homophobic Heckler Owned. For such a progressive comedian, Hofstetter certainly seems to own a lot of human beings. The notoriety Steve had gained for his unique brand of comeback comedy had put him on the radar of several larger internet personalities. Even a brief cringe-inducing appearance on the Joe Rogan Experience, sitting across from the dumbbell-curling dwarf sporting a Reddit shirt as he relayed the tale of 8 women competing for his attention.
It's like this after-party thing that they put together for just them and the 2 of us, one of which they hated because he bombed. And like there are just these 8 hot girls surrounding me. One shouldered another one out of the way to sit next to me. I was like, this is I've like nothing I've ever experienced.
But it wasn't until Steve's appearance on the Painkiller Already podcast, colloquially known as PKA, that Steve would find his way into an already established market of dedicated fans whose goodwill he could exploit.
You're trying to be woke, but I don't think you're all the way there.
I will not let them take retarded.
In the post-O&A world of neutered comedy, PKA was seen as somewhat of a reprieve from woke broadcasting, often tackling subjects that others would fear cause for demonetization.
Well, you guys have some really ghoulish topics on this show. I just want to bring that up. And now what's this? Another person got hurt. Let's dissect it. What are you guys going to talk about next? Female genital mutilation?
That was last week. We had strong opinions on female genital mutilation. Most of us are against it.
Oh my God.
PKA's hosts consist of lovable boomer and haver of Type 2 fun, Matt Woodworth, alongside felonious steroid abuser Kyle Lamar Myers of former FPS Russia fame, and co-host of questionable chromosome count, Taylor Merca, landing top-tier celebrity guests like Dick Masterson, Anthony Cumia, and former NFL running back Arian Foster. Steve's first appearance would occur on December 31st, 2016, to a less-than-enthused audience response.
We're live, Painkiller Already, episode 315, with our guest Steve Hofstetter. Kyle?
Frequent posts would be made to the podcast subreddit r/PKA, begging the host to refrain from inviting the rosy-cheeked comic back, annoyed by his frequent interruptions and tendency to stomp on punchlines. But these pleas went unheeded.
Episode 335 with our guest Steve Hofstetter. Kyle?
You gotta give them what they want. You gotta give them what they want. A few advertisements tonight. Casper.
Steve's appearances, occurring at the peak of the Trump presidency, would often have him butting heads with hosts on various political issues, especially with resident edgelord and Anne Frank skeptic Kyle Myers. But it was with the recently emasculated host Taylor Merca that Steve would be exposed, not just for his political insufferability, but for his lack of comedic talent as well.
Everybody knows that there are shithole countries out there that you wouldn't want to live in. Like, would you want to live in Somalia? No, because it's kind of a shithole. It's insanely dangerous, and it's not
I also
safe.
wouldn't want to live where any of the 3 of you live. So what does it matter?
What a ridiculous comparison. Come
No,
spend 30 minutes.
my point is I wouldn't want. You think I haven't? I'm a fucking road comic. You think I haven't traveled?
Oh, have you played Mogadishu yet? No, you fucking haven't.
I'm
you
not
liar.
saying that. I'm not saying I haven't traveled there. I'm saying I've traveled to where
That's
the fuck.
the same as those pirate countries where they sail
I
out and
didn't
try to
say.
get enough food
Stop
to eat.
saying the thing I didn't say as if I said it.
A comedian that crowns himself a master of crowd work should be quick-witted, succinct, and brutal. Steve is none of these things. He's a wordy, limp-wristed dullard. In the words of Shakespeare, brevity is the soul of wit. That's British for don't waste my fucking time, asshole. After any Hofstetter appearance, r/PKA would be littered with a slew of posts criticizing Steve's comedic ability in comparison to Taylor's, a man whose only comedic credentials come in form of being a big Opie and Anthony fan. A noticeably upset Steve can be seen venting his frustrations towards fan response on one of his many appearances.
By the way, Taylor, you have no fucking idea how many people message me from the show and say, hey, can you convince Taylor to do stand-up comedy? I'm like, that is up to Taylor. That is absolutely not up to me.
Yeah, not
like,
gonna
but
get
just
bullied
tell him he'll be good. And I'm like, yeah, he knows he's funny.
It may seem like I took a detour just to make fun of Steve's poor performance on a podcast now dedicated to drooling over the male physique, but there's a larger story to be told here. When I said I had already heard the material in Hofstetter's latest hour, it wasn't from frequenting open mic night at the Laugh Factory, although I could have heard the same there, but because I had already listened to his appearances on PKA prior to sitting down and forcing myself to trudge through his latest hour of dreck. These jokes were delivered in the same way.
Why are you going west? And I'm like, because we're in upstate New York, and that's where everything else is. Like, I'm not... It's 2 a.m. Vermont's closed. Like, where the fuck do you want me to go, you know? Go to Buffalo.
Why are you going west? Because we're in upstate New York. That's where the world lives. I'm not going to Vermont. It's 2 a.m. Vermont's closed.
With the same cadence.
Like, someone wrote that they didn't like one of my videos, and I looked them up on, like, there was on their Twitter, and I clicked onto their Twitter to see who they were, and they had 1 follower. And so I just wrote back and I said, you didn't need to tweet that. You could have just told someone.
Someone tweeted they didn't like one of my videos. I looked at their Twitter to see who they were. They had 1 follower. I was like, hey man, you didn't need to tweet that. You could have just told someone.
And the exact same taglines.
Maybe the police are just having a party. Ain't no party like the police party because the police party don't stop. Because you can't call the police.
You know, like I bet the police are just having a party. You know? They're just having a party. Yeah, ain't no party like the police party. You know, the police party don't stop. Well, because you can't call the police. But anyway, so...
I already knew about the murder at the hotel.
And they were still looking for the guy. Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, not the one who was murdered. They knew where he was, but the other guy.
Not the one who had been shot and killed. They knew exactly where he was, but...
I already knew about the dog shitting in the airport.
Looks away from the phone, looks at the guy, looks back at the phone and goes, some people are so rude. Which, yeah, we're all like, oh, this woman dies today.
Looks away from her phone, looks at the guy, looks back at her phone and says, some people are so rude. I know, we're like, oh, this woman dies today.
And even if I didn't, I could have checked Reddit where Steve had already posted the story a full year before his special. For a man dedicated to taking down hecklers, Steve is surprisingly inept when it comes to improv. He has his stories, and he'll tell them the same way, with no deviations, and he'll get the same sprinkling of applause. Every time. In a world where every person to ever step foot in a comedy club is required to have a podcast, more than ever it's important to be funny on the spot, conversationally. Repeating the same hack material you do on stage doesn't cut it anymore. It hasn't since 2002. What made shows like Tough Crowd or Opie and Anthony so special was seeing comedians tap into humor where there was none. If you went into your act, it was obvious, and you'd be rightly called out for it.
He's like, okay, we're just going to move it over to Iraq now. I mean, that doesn't do anything. I mean, it's like in Vietnam. It's like, what if they go, like, okay, the war's getting too crazy here. We're going to move it over to Cambodia.
Yeah. What now? That worked out well. What would your mother say about this? Whoa! Did you just do your hot Korean mama as Osama bin Laden?
Any fat fool can make you laugh if they sit down and write out jokes beforehand. But it takes true talent to pull funny out of your ass at a moment's notice. And even more, it takes bravery to throw out a joke knowing it very well could bomb and you'd be deservedly mocked for it. Steve is not brave. He'd rather stick with what's safe and prepared than stick his pasty neck out there and risk getting it cut. But Steve takes down hecklers, right? That's improv. He can't prepare a response for what some idiot might unknowingly yell out at one of his shows. And that's true. While there are many who theorize Hofstetter plants his hecklers, that's something I'd rather leave for the internet to speculate. I have no reason to suspect these incidents are planned. I'd assume the comebacks would be much more carefully crafted if they were. but Steve certainly doesn't like it when people insinuate his heckler videos might be staged.
When someone sees someone doing something good and immediately assumes it's fake, it's because they're not good at it. And so they can't fathom a world where someone else can be.
He does have a tendency to paint himself in the best light possible, though. Even speeding up the clip of his first pitch for the Tampa Bay Rays by his own admission. But we'll take his word for it and let some of Steve's top heckler videos speak for themselves.
Has a heckler ever gotten the better of me? Has anyone with a knife ever beat a gun?
I never say anything on stage that I wouldn't say off stage. And here's the fun part. You tell me the sky's green just makes you look weird.
Yikes. Let's compare that to a real comedian, Patrice O'Neal. A master of crowd work in his own right, Patrice gets up to the stage only to find he's sharing it with a sign language interpreter and stenographer. Let's see how he handles it.
Fuck. Oh, they wrote fuck. You say it was writing fibbing, so what are you gonna do? So how you doing? You know. Court stenographer. You know that don't make me feel comfortable. But I got the look from white people. This look. I really like her. Woo, we're gonna have some real silent fucking tonight. We gonna get busy. Oh, fuck, she's gonna go, oh, oh!
Hey, that's not the same. Those aren't hecklers. That's just crowd work. Fair enough. Let's see how Bill Burr handles heckling from a crowd of hostile O&A fans in the lovely, well-mannered city of Philadelphia.
Fuck all of you and fuck the Liberty Bell and shove it up Ben Franklin's ass. What do you think about that? All of you motherfuckers, I hope that bridge collapses onto your pathetic lives. Go fuck yourselves. 6 minutes left and I will be selling my CD after this shit, you motherfuckers. And the only way you get one is if I throw it at your fucking stupid heads. You bunch of racist fucking morons.
Now you may say it isn't fair to compare our pal Steve to two of the most talented comedians of our generation. And you're right, it's not. Steve, apparently, can't even compete comedically with a Missouri-based mongoloid. So why expect him to measure up to the likes of O'Neal and Burr? Because the bar for comedy is high. Well, at least it should be. I suppose a large part of Steve's success is his willingness to whore himself out to anyone willing to pay. From performing on stage with his book prominently displayed behind him, hawking his albums and merchandise outside every gig, to pitifully giving away free tickets in hopes of making that sweet sold-out show bonus.
Go to my website, shoot me an email, say, hey, I watch PKA, I want to go see Comedy Juice, and I'll hook you up with tickets on me.
This all compounded by continuous clawing for Twitter/Reddit stardom through his many attempts at owning the reps. But that's all about Steve's desperation. So let's get to the heart of the issue. What exactly makes Steve Hofstetter so uniquely insufferable?
Please clap.
If you have something interesting to say, you can bet your bottom dollar Steve has a story about that in his act.
I even have a joke about this happening to me once. There are redheaded Jews. It's not common, but I used to do a bit about being a redheaded Jew.
I just had a clip the other day where I've been doing this new material where I'm like making fun of Nazis, like of today's Nazis.
Today's
Nazis
That's
are
a
terrible.
Bold step. You're making fun of Nazis, huh?
Steve loves to be the center of attention, which isn't a surprise for a comedian. Show business is full of people in search of the attention their parents never gave them. But our boy Steve takes it to a whole nother level. So egregious is his need to be in the spotlight that even resident joke trampler Matt Woodworth had to put his foot down on the frenzied comedian's interjections. During the long-awaited recap of Kyle's prison sentencing for charges of idiotically ordering half an ounce of marijuana concentrate through the United States Postal Service, Steve chimes in after several previous interruptions to ask if the guys are up to date on the latest season of Serial, before Cashew Matt mercifully steps in, attempting to silence the five-headed comic.
It's like 35 years in federal prison.
Jesus
Yeah.
Christ. Well,
That's
also. But did you guys listen to season 3 of Serial?
You really gonna interrupt his story for? Okay.
No.
Steve's arrogance is matched by few in the comedy world, perhaps only eclipsed by the equally funny, body-positive comedian Amy Schumer. How anyone could not be amused by the banal, self-important words pouring out of his mouth is beyond him. In a stunning display of humility, Hofstetter unveils where he believes he ranks amongst comedians who deal with hecklers.
I'm not as good with hecklers as Jimmy Carr. I think Jimmy Carr is the absolute best in the world at this. But, I'm top 5. And so if you watch the guy who's known for being very good with hecklers being good with a heckler, wouldn't you just be like, oh, well, he's good at that?
Now, I don't want to overstate my case here, but if Steve believes this comeback could only have been crafted by 4 other comedians in the world, then he is truly beyond the wings of redemption.
You have daughters, and I was standing up for women's rights, and you were offended by that. That's fucked up, dude. I hope the rest of you can be okay with that.
But plenty of comedians are arrogant. That doesn't stop them from being great. Many comedians have a wholly inflated self-image, but are still capable of winning over a crowd and, more importantly, laughing at themselves in the process. Patrice O'Neal again being a great example of this. But that's the key, isn't it? Being able to laugh at yourself. Steve is incapable of this. He takes himself far too seriously. Aside from a few jokes at the expense of his colossal forehead and evident red hair, Steve really seems to consider himself a man who's got his shit together, here to point out the follies of everyone else before looking inward. Now that's a man with a dirty room. He has no problem pointing out the many hypocrisies of conservatives, but dare crack a joke at the expense of the left, and Steve immediately springs into a fit of defensive justification.
I just read a comment. I'm just like, I'm not these fucking morons.
And yet you're still a liberal.
Yeah. So?
I would think, go trafficking among that sort, maybe you'd get a little disgusted with some of the stuff you read over there sometimes.
Wait, I don't think that these girls were liberal.
No, of course not.
Undoubtedly, this is due to his identity being so closely tied to his politics. A jab at the Democratic Party isn't just playful banter, it's an attack on who he is. Check his Twitter bio if you don't believe me, where he brags about being a Nobel Peace Prize nominee and human first, comedian second. Ew. He really does fancy himself an agent of change. His walkout song isn't just a Rage Against the Machine song he likes. It's about speaking truth to power, like Steve does. Listen to the words, man. For a guy who's consistently been heckled throughout his career, Steve has remarkably thin skin. And I don't just say that due to Steve's uncanny resemblance to a progeria kid. He has a special called Ginger Kid, a book titled Ginger Kid, and still, when people yell out the dreaded G word at his comedy events, he's left flustered, hardly able to formulate a comeback outside labeling the heckler an asshole.
You just called me Ginger? Man with that much gray hair shouldn't make fun of me for the color of mine. Sorry, my apologies, that little gray hair.
Let's look at how a real ginger comedian conducts himself when called out for his unfuckable follicles.
Thank you, redheaded fucking piece of shit.
There goes with the fucking again.
Why would it hurt my feelings that my hair is red? It's been that my whole life.
Exactly.
It's the only thing you can come up with. You don't even have like a unique.
Fuck you,
fuck
fuck
you,
you,
Louis. Say I don't like you. That's
fuck
what
you,
heard.
Louis, with your 2 legs and your goddamn toes.
A big part of Steve's problem is that he's incapable of winning over a new audience. In his own words,
I've been doing this long enough to know that I'm binary. Like, people either like me or they don't. It's ones and zeros, and that's fine.
That would be fine. But Steve only acknowledges this fact. He's yet to accept it. You must already agree with Steve to like his comedy. Unlike other more gifted peers in his industry able to turn a hostile crowd around, Hofstetter prefers a friendly crowd of familiar faces. Our sweet little Stevie just wants everyone to like him, to laugh at his jokes and appreciate his perspective. But he knows he can't win them over with his humor when it's so bland and dependent upon sharing the same worldview. So how does he combat this? With countless virtue-signaling applause breaks, of course.
But every single gun owner here knows someone who owns a gun that you wish didn't. Every last one of you has been at a firing range and been like, Brad's here? We're all gonna fucking die.
And by the way, before anybody freaks out, yeah, I'm not gonna vote for Trump because I'm a rational adult. And what the why would we do this? Why would we do this? See, I could say a lot of horrible, horrible things, and I'm not going to because I'm respecting you as a human being. So the next time someone disagrees with you, respect them, okay?
Is there anything more sickening than a comedian making a generally accepted statement and basking in the applause like some profound knowledge bomb was just dropped?
Live Benson, I hate you get it. You guys,
Live man.
stop getting applause. You mother. You only hate applause.
In the words of the great Colin Quinn, no one cares, stupid. Shut up and let them laugh. It would be one thing if Steve was simply not funny. It would be another if he were just too PC for his comedy to resonate with a degenerate like myself. But it's not just those two things. It's this aura of arrogance that permeates every word to come out of his dry mouth. A smug, condescending tone that lets the audience know, if you didn't laugh, it's not because it wasn't funny. It's because you're too stupid, too ignorant to truly appreciate the depth of his comedic genius. Steve was put on this earth to enlighten us all and hold those in power responsible for the plight of the common man. A true crusader of justice. In reality, he's a hack. A hack that couldn't reach his comedic peak through conventional means, and instead had to resort to internet clickbait and sanctimonious acclamation to satiate his already inflated ego. So in the end, what more can we say about Steve Hofstetter? He's a comedian who can't take a joke, can't win over a crowd with a different perspective, one who desperately craves the limelight to the point of pimping himself out like a $5 whore on a street corner, and one who can't improv to save his own life, yet prides himself as a master of crowd work. So what do you do when you can't get the laughs you so desperately crave? You beg for applause, of course. You beg and beg and beg and hope the crowd can't see through the thin veneer of your confident outer shell to the feeble little man behind it, still in search of the affirmation he was deprived of in youth. A ginger boy with nothing funny left to say. So I beg of you.
Please clap.
If you made it this far into the video, you're a real trooper. I know this video is a little different from what I normally do, but it's something that's been weighing on my mind for a while, and I had to get it out. I know it's a cornball way to end any video, but if you did make it to the end of this nonsense, please consider leaving it a like or a comment. I don't get paid for this shit, but my autistic tendencies compel me to create garbage like this in hopes that it might resonate with someone, and a like really does help it reach a larger audience. In the days of research and production leading up to this video, I found myself having to take frequent breaks due to Hofstetter-induced headaches, so hopefully some of you found some enjoyment in the product of my suffering. I even re-recorded this video a couple times after investing in new audio equipment so it wouldn't be quite so painful to listen to, so hopefully you can notice and appreciate the difference in quality. As always, I'll leave links in the description to all sources mentioned in the video. Also linked below is my Twitter, but I never use it, so you'd be wasting a follow. That's about it. Thanks for watching. I'll see you around.